I was standing in my backyard with my morning coffee when I noticed the construction crew breaking ground right along my property line. And that's when I knew the Meadowbrook Springs Homeowners Association was about to make my life hell. The whole thing started innocently enough. I'm Xavier, been living in this Phoenix, Arizona subdivision for 3 years now. Meadowbrook Springs is one of those master-planned communities where every house looks vaguely similar, and the lawns are maintained with military precision. I bought my place because it was close to work and the price was right, not because I particularly cared about living in an HOA-controlled neighborhood. That was my first mistake. The morning was typical for late March in Phoenix, already pushing 80 degrees at 7 in the morning. I just finished my first cup when I heard the sound of machinery. Walking around the side of my house, I spotted a backhoe positioning itself near the fence that separated my property from the common area the HOA maintained. 3 men in hard hats were unloading lumber from a truck. I approached the fence cautiously. "Hey, what's going on here?" One of the workers, a guy with a sun-weathered face and a clipboard, looked up. "HOA's putting in a storage shed. Should only take us a couple days." "A shed?" I frowned, looking at where they'd marked out the foundation. "That looks awfully close to my fence." The foreman shrugged. "We're just following the plans, buddy. Take it up with the HOA if you've got concerns." I didn't like it, but I figured the HOA knew where their property ended and mine began. I went inside and pulled out my property documents, studying the plat map that showed my lot boundaries. The common area was definitely on the other side of my fence, but the proposed shed location looked uncomfortably close. By noon, I'd called the HOA office 3 times. Each time, I got the same chirpy receptionist who assured me that Patricia Jenkins, the HOA president, would call me back. She never did. The construction continued over the next 2 days. I watched with growing unease as the concrete pad was poured and the framing went up. The shed was going to be substantial, maybe 12 by 16 feet, with a pitched roof and vinyl siding to match the neighborhood aesthetic, and it was definitely close to my property line. Too close. On the 3rd day, Patricia Jenkins finally showed up. I was working from home when my doorbell rang insistently. Opening it, I found myself face to face with a woman in her late 40s wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and oversized sunglasses. Her blonde hair was cut in that severe bob that seemed to be the uniform of HOA board members everywhere. "Mr. Xavier, I'm Patricia Jenkins, HOA president. I understand you've been harassing our office staff." I blinked. Harassing? I called 3 times asking about the shed being built on the property line. "The shed is being constructed entirely on HOA common property, I can assure you. We had our property manager verify the boundaries before we broke ground." She handed me a rolled-up paper. "Here's a copy of the site plan if it will ease your mind." I unrolled the plan right there in the doorway. The drawing showed my property line and the shed positioned several feet away from it. But when I looked at the actual construction site visible from my front window, the reality didn't match the drawing. "Patricia, this plan shows the shed at least 4 feet from my fence. That thing they're building looks like it's practically touching it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Mr. Xavier, I don't appreciate your tone. The HOA board has approved this project, the permits have been pulled with the city, and construction is proceeding as planned. If you have legitimate concerns, you can submit them in writing at our next board meeting." "When's the next board meeting?" 3 weeks from now." 3 weeks. The shed will be finished by then." She removed her sunglasses, revealing pale blue eyes that had gone cold. "That's not my problem, Mr. Xavier. The meeting schedule is published in advance. Perhaps if you'd attended previous meetings, you'd have known about this project sooner." I felt my jaw clench. I want to see the survey they used to locate the shed. Our records are available for review by appointment. You can call the office to schedule." With that, she turned on her heel and walked back to her white Lexus SUV parked in my driveway. I spent the rest of the afternoon stewing. Something felt wrong about this whole situation. The shed in the plans Patricia showed me didn't match what was being built. I'd lived here long enough to have a pretty good sense of where my property ended, and that shed was encroaching. By the time my girlfriend Melissa got home from work, I'd made a decision. "I'm hiring a surveyor," I told her as she kicked off her shoes in the entryway. Melissa worked as a paralegal downtown, and she had more patience for this kind of bureaucratic nonsense than I did. "How much is that going to cost?" I got a quote for $800. "But I need to know exactly where my property line is. I think that shed is over the line." She sighed but nodded. "If you think it's necessary. Just try not to make enemies with the HOA if you can help it. We have to live here." The next day was Saturday, and the construction crew was taking the weekend off. I took the opportunity to really examine the shed's position. Using a tape measure, I extended it from my fence to the edge of the shed foundation. 18 inches. The shed was only 18 inches from my fence, and my fence was right on the property line according to the survey that had been done when I bought the house. I called Arizona Precision Surveying first thing Monday morning. They could have someone out by Thursday if I wanted to pay a rush fee. I paid it. Thursday came with a cloudless sky and the kind of dry heat that makes Phoenix famous. The surveyor, a patient man named Robert who'd been doing this for 20 years, arrived at 8 sharp with his equipment. He spent the next 3 hours taking measurements, referring to county records, and placing small flags at various points around my property. I followed him nervously, watching as he worked. When he finally made it to the back corner where the shed sat, nearly complete now, he spent an extra long time checking and rechecking his measurements. "Well?" I asked when he finally looked up. Robert's expression was neutral, but I caught a flicker of concern. "Your property line runs right where your fence is, just like the original survey indicated. That shed's sitting 18 inches over the line onto your property." My heart sank and soared simultaneously. I was right, but now I had a problem. "You're absolutely sure? Positive?" "I'll have the full report with all the technical details ready by Monday, but there's no question. That structure is encroaching on your lot." He pointed to where he'd placed bright pink flags. "See those markers? That's your actual boundary. The shed's foundation crosses over by about 1.5 feet. I thanked Robert and watched him pack up his equipment. As his truck pulled away, I saw movement from the corner of my eye. Patricia Jenkins was standing on the other side of the fence, having apparently witnessed the entire survey. "Find what you were looking for, Mr. Xavier." Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "Actually, yes. Your shed is 18 inches over my property line. It needs to be moved." She laughed, an ugly sound. "That's absurd. We had the boundaries verified." "By who?" "Our property manager." "Did your property manager hire a licensed surveyor?" Patricia's face flushed. "We used the county records and measured from established reference points. A survey wasn't necessary for a simple shed." "Apparently it was, because your shed is on my property." "I'll have the official report on Monday, and then we need to discuss removing or relocating it." Her expression hardened. "The HOA doesn't answer to individual homeowners' whims, Mr. Xavier. That shed stays where it is." "Then I'll have it removed myself and bill the HOA." "You will do no such thing. That is HOA property, and tampering with it would be destruction of common property. I'll have you fined and possibly arrested." I kept my voice level despite my rising anger. "Patricia, the shed is on my land. The survey will prove it. This doesn't have to be a war, but I'm not letting the HOA build on my property." She stabbed a finger in my direction. "You'll be hearing from our attorney, and expect a full inspection of your property for code violations. I'm sure we'll find something." With that threat hanging in the air, she stalked off. Melissa was less than thrilled when I filled her in that evening. I knew this was going to turn into a nightmare. What was I supposed to do? Let them steal part of my lot? No, you're right to fight it. I just know how these things go. HOAs can make life miserable. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Let me ask around at work. One of the attorneys I work for does property law. Maybe he can give you some advice." Monday's survey report arrived via email with a PDF attachment. It was thorough and damning. The shed encroached 18 inches at its closest point, with detailed measurements and references to county records. Robert had even included photos with the surveyor's flags clearly visible. I forwarded the report to the HOA office, along with a formal letter stating that the shed needed to be removed or relocated within 30 days. I kept the tone professional, citing the relevant property law and offering to discuss solutions. The response came 2 hours later. It wasn't from Patricia Jenkins, but from a law firm called Morrison and Associates, representing the Meadowbrook Springs HOA. The letter, filled with legalese, essentially said that the HOA disputed the survey's findings, maintained that the shed was properly located, and warned me against any action that might interfere with HOA property or operations. I called Melissa at work. She conferenced in her boss, David Morrison. No relation to the Morrison in Morrison and Associates, thankfully. David reviewed my survey report and the HOA's response. "This is pretty clear-cut, Grant. The survey is from a licensed professional, and you have county records backing up your property line. The HOA doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. So, what do I do? Send them a certified letter giving them formal notice that they're trespassing on your property with the shed? Include the survey. Give them 30 days to remedy the situation, then file for a court order to have it removed at their expense. Will that work? Eventually. But HOAs can be stubborn. Be prepared for this to take a few months and cost you some money in legal fees. On the bright side, if you win, which you should, the court will likely award you attorney's fees and costs." I drafted the letter that night with David's help. It was sent certified mail the next morning. I also sent copies to each individual HOA board member, hoping someone besides Patricia might see reason. The next 2 weeks were quiet. Too quiet. The shed was completed, painted in neutral beige tones, and put into use. I saw HOA maintenance workers storing lawn equipment in it. Every time I looked at it, sitting there 18 inches onto my property, my blood pressure rose. Then the fines started. The first citation arrived in my mailbox on a Wednesday. According to the notice, my trash cans had been visible from the street on a non-collection day, violating Section 12.4 of the CC and Artiques. Fine. $100. I put the cans out the night before collection like always. They'd been taken in within an hour of the trucks leaving. Someone had to have been watching my house specifically to catch that brief window. 2 days later, another citation. My front yard grass was allegedly a 1/4 inch longer than the permitted maximum height. Fine. $75. Then my house number needed repainting because one digit showed minor fading. $150. My mailbox post had a small scratch in the paint. $75. A weed was visible in my rock landscaping. $100. In 10 days, I'd racked up $600 in fines for violations I'd never received citations for in 3 years of living there. The message was clear. Fall in line or be buried in petty penalties. Melissa found me in the garage one evening, staring at the stack of citation notices. This is harassment. You think? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. No, I mean legally. This is a pattern of retaliatory behavior. David says you can fight it, but more importantly, it actually helps your case. It shows the HOA is acting in bad faith. I looked at her. How does getting fined into oblivion help me? Because it demonstrates their motive isn't about following rules, it's about punishing you for challenging them. Keep every notice. Document everything. We're building a case. She was right, of course. But that didn't make it easier to watch my mailbox like it might contain a snake every day. The 30 days I'd given the HOA to address the shed issue expired on a Monday. They'd done nothing. I called David Morrison's office and retained him officially. He filed a civil complaint in Maricopa County Superior Court, seeking an injunction to have the shed removed and moved, plus damages for the encroachment and my costs. The HOA's response was to hold an emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, but the results were mailed to all homeowners. Effective immediately, my HOA dues were being increased by a special assessment of $500 per month to cover legal costs associated with defending the association against frivolous litigation. The letter specifically named me, painting me as a troublemaker who was costing the entire neighborhood money with my baseless claims. It included Patricia's spin on the situation, claiming I was trying to steal HOA property and that multiple board members had personally verified the shed's location. My neighbors started giving me cold looks. Mrs. Henderson next door stopped waving. The Patel family across the street, who I'd had over for a barbecue just last month, suddenly found reasons to go inside when they saw me. One evening, I found a note taped to my front door. "Thanks for raising everyone's dues, jerk. Hope you're happy." It was unsigned. Melissa squeezed my hand when I showed her. People will see the truth eventually. Will they? Patricia's got them convinced I'm the villain here. Then we make sure the truth comes out. She had an idea. The HOA's next regular board meeting was in 2 days. As a homeowner, I had the right to attend and speak during the public comment period. David helped me prepare a presentation with photos, the survey report, and a timeline of events. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a bland building designed to host exactly this kind of gathering. I arrived 15 minutes early to find the parking lot already half full. Inside, rows of folding chairs faced a long table where the 5 board members sat. Patricia was in the center, flanked by 2 men and 2 women I recognized vaguely from neighborhood events. The room filled quickly. I counted at least 60 homeowners, triple the usual attendance according to the sign and sheet. Patricia had rallied the troops. The meeting started with standard business. Minutes were approved, financials reviewed, a proposal for new pool furniture was discussed. Then came the public comment period, Patricia's eyes fixed on me. "We have 1 person signed up to speak. Grant, Xavier, you have 3 minutes. I walked to the front, my laptop in hand. I'd prepared a slideshow. "Thank you. I want to address the shed that was recently built on the common property line adjacent to my lot." Patricia interrupted immediately. "Mr. Xavier, if this is about your ongoing litigation, it's not appropriate for discussion here." "I'm not discussing the litigation. I'm providing information to my fellow homeowners who are being charged $500 a month because the board made a mistake." Murmurs ran through the crowd. I clicked to my first slide, showing the survey map. This is a professional survey conducted by a licensed surveyor. It shows that the shed was built 18 inches over my property line onto my lot. The murmurs grew louder. I showed photos next, the surveyor's flags clearly visible in relation to the shed. Patricia banged her gavel. "This is inappropriate. You're presenting misleading information. I'm presenting a licensed survey. Do you have a competing survey that shows something different? I looked directly at her. Because according to public records, the HOA never hired a surveyor. The location was determined by the property manager using a tape measure and assumptions. One of the other board members, a man named Richard, leaned forward. Patricia, is that true? We didn't get a survey. It wasn't necessary, she snapped. We used county records. So did my surveyor, I said, and those records show my property line exactly where my fence is. The shed is over the line. This is a matter of fact, not opinion. A woman in the third row raised her hand. If the shed is on his property, why are we paying to fight him in court? Because Mr. Xavier is trying to steal HOA property, Patricia said sharply. He's making false claims. I have a licensed survey, I repeated. All I've asked is for the shed to be moved so it's entirely on HOA property, where it should have been built in the first place. Instead of doing that, the board has chosen to spend our dues money on attorneys and retaliate against me with harassment citations. That got their attention. I showed slides of the various fines I'd received, the dates they were issued, and the timing relative to my survey and legal notice. In the 3 years before I challenged the shed location, I received 0 citations. In the 2 weeks after I sent my survey to the HOA, I received 6 citations for increasingly minor alleged violations. This is retaliation. The room erupted in conversation. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly. Order. This meeting will come to order. Richard was reading something on his phone. I'm looking at Arizona Statute 15-1140. It specifically prohibits HOAs from retaliating against homeowners who exercise their legal rights. If what Grant is saying is true, we could be in violation. It's not true, Patricia insisted, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. Another board member, a woman named Susan, spoke up. Patricia, did you direct the violations committee to target Grant's property? I did no such thing. The violations were legitimate. 6 violations in 2 weeks after none for 3 years. Susan didn't sound convinced. The meeting devolved from there. Homeowners started demanding answers. Why hadn't a survey been done before construction? Who authorized the special assessment? Could they see the HOA's attorney's opinion on the case? Patricia tried to maintain control, but the board members themselves were turning on her. Richard made a motion to suspend the special assessment pending an independent review of the shed situation. Susan seconded. Patricia called for a vote, and it passed 4-1, with only Patricia dissenting. Then Richard moved to hire an independent surveyor to verify the property line. That also passed 4-1. I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. Patricia shot me a look of pure hatred as I walked out, but I'd accomplished what I came for. The neighborhood now knew the truth, or at least knew there was serious doubt about the HOA's version of events. The independent survey was conducted a week later. I watched from my back patio as a different surveying company set up their equipment. They were even more thorough than Robert had been, spending nearly 4 hours taking measurements and checking county records. Their report arrived 3 days later and was identical to mine in all relevant respects. The shed encroached 18 inches onto my property. There was no ambiguity. The next HOA board meeting was tense. Patricia was absent, having apparently called in sick. Richard chaired the meeting in her place. The independent survey was presented and discussed. The board voted unanimously to relocate the shed and to drop the association's legal opposition to my complaint. I thought it was over. I was wrong. 2 days after the vote, I came home from work to find my fence damaged. Someone had taken a sledgehammer to a 10-foot section, reducing it to splinters. The destruction was clearly deliberate, and it was right near where the shed sat. I called the police. Officer Martinez arrived within 20 minutes, took photos, and filled out a report. Any idea who might have done this? I have suspicions, but no proof. I explained the situation with the HOA and Patricia Jenkins. He nodded slowly. Lot of weird things happen in these HOA neighborhoods. Drives people crazy sometimes. File an insurance claim for the fence and let us know if you see anything suspicious. I called David Morrison next. This is escalating. I think Patricia is behind it. Probably, but proving it will be hard. Make sure you have the police report. Keep documenting everything. Install cameras if you don't have them already. I spent the weekend installing a comprehensive security camera system. 4 cameras covered every approach to my house and property. If Patricia or anyone else came back, I'd have video evidence. The cameras proved their worth faster than I expected. On Tuesday night at just past 2 in the morning, motion alerts woke me up. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera app. A figure in dark clothing was spray painting something on my garage door. I called 911 while pulling on shoes. Someone's vandalizing my property right now. I have them on camera. By the time I made it to my front door, police sirens were approaching. The vandal heard them too and took off running toward the street, but the cameras had captured everything in clear detail. Officer Martinez returned, this time with a partner. They reviewed my footage and I watched the recognition dawn on Martinez's face. That's interesting. What? The vandal's wearing a distinctive jacket. I've seen that jacket before. He wouldn't say more, but he took a copy of the video footage. The spray paint on my garage door was bright red and read, "Thief" in 2-foot-tall letters. It took me 3 hours and multiple cans of paint remover to clean it off the next day. That afternoon, Patricia Jenkins was arrested. According to the police report I obtained later, the distinctive jacket in my video matched one Patricia had been photographed wearing at a recent city council meeting. More importantly, when police executed a search warrant on her home, they found the spray paint cans in her garage, along with the sledgehammer she'd used on my fence. Both had her fingerprints all over them. She was charged with criminal trespassing and criminal damage, both misdemeanors in Arizona. But the case got more interesting when the police dug deeper. It turned out Patricia had been embezzling from the HOA. Over the past 2 years, she'd siphoned off nearly $30,000 through fake invoices and inflated service contracts. The shed project itself had been overpriced, with Patricia pocketing the difference between what the HOA paid and what the contractor actually charged. The discovery came about almost by accident. When the board voted to relocate the shed, they asked for the original construction invoices. The numbers didn't match what had been reported to the membership. That prompted an audit which uncovered the whole scheme. Patricia's arrest and the embezzlement scandal made the local news. I gave a brief interview to a reporter from the Arizona Republic, explaining how my property line dispute had inadvertently exposed the corruption. The HOA held an emergency meeting to remove Patricia from the board and elect a new president. Richard was chosen, and his first act was to apologize publicly to me for how the situation had been handled. The shed will be relocated at HOA expense, he announced at the meeting. All fines issued to Mr. Xavier will be rescinded, and the special assessment is permanently canceled. We're also reviewing our procedures to ensure this kind of thing never happens again. The membership approved a motion to file a civil suit against Patricia for the embezzled funds. Her homeowner's insurance would cover some of it, but she was likely facing personal bankruptcy in addition to her criminal charges. The shed was moved in April, relocated 4 feet over to sit entirely on HOA property. The company that did the move confirmed that the original location had been marked incorrectly by the first property manager, who had apparently eyeballed the measurements rather than using proper surveying techniques. That property manager had been fired once the audit revealed his role in Patricia's schemes. My fence was repaired, also at HOA expense. The citation notices stopped. Neighbors started waving again, now that they understood I'd been the wronged party all along. Mrs. Henderson even brought over a casserole, by way of apology for believing Patricia's version of events. The civil case against the HOA was settled in May. They agreed to pay my attorney's fees, which came to just under $9,000, plus $1,500 for my survey, fence repair, and other costs. In exchange, I agreed to drop my claim for additional damages and to not pursue any further action against the association itself. Patricia's criminal trial was scheduled for July. I was listed as a witness, though the prosecution said they probably wouldn't need me to testify given the physical evidence and the embezzlement charges that had been added. In June, Patricia's attorney reached out about a plea deal. She would plead guilty to embezzlement and criminal damage, accept probation and restitution terms, and resign from the HOA permanently. In exchange, the prosecutor would recommend no jail time for a first-time offender. The judge accepted the plea in early August. Patricia was sentenced to 5 years of supervised probation, ordered to pay full restitution of $32,000 to the HOA including my costs, and given 1,800 hours of community service. She was also barred from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for 10 years. I attended the sentencing hearing. Patricia looked diminished, her expensive clothes replaced by a simple dress, her perfect hair limp and unkempt. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she stood and faced me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Xavier. I let my pride and my desire for control turn me into someone I'm not. You were right about the shed, and instead of admitting the mistake, I made everything worse." Her voice cracked. "I hope you can forgive me someday." I didn't respond, but I nodded slightly. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I could acknowledge her apology. Life in Meadowbrook Springs slowly returned to normal. Richard proved to be a competent and reasonable HOA president. He implemented new rules requiring professional surveys for any common area construction projects, established an independent audit committee to review the association's finances annually, and created a homeowner bill of rights that protected residents from retaliatory actions. The shed sat in its new location, properly on HOA property, storing lawn equipment just as intended. Sometimes I looked at it and marveled at how something so simple had spiraled so far out of control. Melissa and I got engaged in September. I proposed at Camelback Mountain, overlooking the city we'd fought so hard to keep our home in. She said yes, laughing at the location choice. "You couldn't pick somewhere without property boundaries," she teased. "Too soon, maybe a little, but she kissed me anyway." We set the wedding for next spring. The HOA approved our request to have the ceremony in the common area park without any hassle. Richard even joked that they'd make sure to survey the tent location first. In October, I ran into the Patel family at the grocery store. Mr. Patel approached me in the produce section, looking uncomfortable. "Grant, I wanted to apologize again for how we treated you during all that business. We should have given you the benefit of the doubt. It's okay, really." Patricia was convincing. She was a con artist, Mrs. Patel said firmly, "And we should have been better neighbors. We'd like to have you and Melissa over for dinner this weekend if you're free." We went, and it was nice. Normal. The kind of neighborhood relationship I'd hoped for when I bought the house. November brought the HOA's annual meeting and elections. Several new board members were elected, all running on platforms of transparency and accountability. The association's finances were presented in detail, showing that the embezzled funds had been largely recovered through Patricia's restitution payments and her insurance policy. Richard was elected to a full term as president by unanimous vote. During his acceptance speech, he mentioned the shed incident as a cautionary tale. We learned this year that good governance means admitting mistakes, not covering them up. It means following the law and respecting property rights. And it means that no one person should have unchecked authority over the association. He looked directly at me. Xavier did this community a service by standing up for what was right, even when it would have been easier to go along. We're better for it. The members applauded. I felt Melissa squeeze my hand. December was quiet. The Phoenix winter was mild as always, 70s during the day and 50s at night. I spent a Saturday afternoon working in the yard, trimming the plants and making sure everything met HOA standards. Not because I feared citations, but because I took pride in my home, Mrs. Henderson called over the fence. "Looking good, Grant. Better than my yard." "Your yard looks great," I called back. Only because my son came over and helped, getting too old to do it all myself. She paused, then added, "Never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you fought about that shed. Patricia needed to be stopped." I nodded. "It got messy, but it worked out. That it did. On Christmas Eve, Melissa and I hosted a party for the neighbors. 20 people showed up, filling our house with laughter and conversation. The Patels came. Mrs. Henderson brought her famous cookies, and even Richard stopped by with his wife. Standing in my living room, watching my neighbors enjoy themselves in my home, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. The battle had been exhausting and expensive, but it had also revealed the character of my community. Some had failed the test initially, but most had come around when presented with the truth. The shed stood as a reminder of what I'd been through, now visible through my back window in its correct location. 18 inches had made all the difference between right and wrong, between proper and improper. Those 18 inches had cost Patricia her reputation, her position, and her freedom. They'd cost the HOA tens of thousands of dollars, and taught the community a valuable lesson about governance and accountability. But they'd also revealed something important about standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. I'd been tempted to give in, to let the HOA have those 18 inches of my property for the sake of peace. The fines, the harassment, the social pressure had all been designed to make me quit. I hadn't quit, and that made all the difference. January brought the new year and a fresh start. The HOA had rebuilt its reputation under Richard's leadership. The finances were transparent, the rules were fairly enforced, and the community had learned that homeowners had rights that deserved respect. Patricia was working her community service hours at a homeless shelter and making her restitution payments. I'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd sold her house in Meadowbrook Springs and moved to a rental apartment in Temp, starting over as she should. I bore her no ill will, despite everything. She'd made her choices and faced the consequences. That was justice enough for me. In February, Melissa and I met with a wedding planner to finalize details for our spring ceremony. The guest list included most of our Meadowbrook Springs neighbors. What could have been a community torn apart by the HOA dispute had instead been strengthened by how it resolved. The surveyor Robert, who had done my original property survey, agreed to attend the wedding. "That's a first," he said when I invited him. "Never been invited to a client's wedding before." You saved me from having an HOA shed permanently on my property. Least I can do is feed you dinner and cake," he laughed. "Put that way, I wouldn't miss it." March arrived with warming temperatures and the first hints of the brutal Phoenix summer to come. I found myself thinking about the day a year ago when I'd first seen that construction crew breaking ground on the shed. So much had happened since then, cascading from that single moment of noticing something wasn't right. Life is like that sometimes. Small details matter. 18 inches of property line mattered enough to expose corruption and save a community from a leader who'd betrayed their trust. It mattered enough to test my resolve and my relationship. It mattered enough to teach me about standing firm when you know you're right. The wedding was beautiful. We held it in the Meadowbrook Springs Common Area Park on a perfect April afternoon. Melissa looked stunning in her dress, and I was probably grinning like an idiot the entire ceremony. Our vows were simple and heartfelt, promising to stand by each other through whatever challenges came our way. During the reception, Richard gave a toast. "To Grant and Melissa, may your property boundaries always be clearly surveyed and your HOA always be reasonable." Everyone laughed, and I raised my glass in acknowledgement. Later, as Melissa and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, she whispered in my ear, "Think we'll have any more HOA drama? God, I hope not. Once in a lifetime is enough. But if we do," I pulled back to look at her, "then we'll handle it together, just like we handled this." She smiled. That's what I wanted to hear. The evening ended with fireworks, courtesy of the HOA's entertainment budget. Standing with my wife under the Arizona stars, watching colored lights explode overhead, I felt grateful for everything. The struggle, the victory, the community that had emerged stronger from the conflict. Summer came and went. The shed remained where it belonged, properly surveyed and located entirely on HOA property. Every time I saw it, I was reminded that details matter, that standing up for yourself is worth the cost, and that even the most difficult conflicts can resolve with persistence and truth on your side. The 18 inches that had caused so much trouble now served as a buffer zone, clearly separating HOA property from mine. The fence was rebuilt and solid. The property line was marked and documented. Everything was exactly as it should have been from the beginning. In August, I received a letter from Patricia's attorney. She'd completed half of her community service hours and was ahead of schedule on her restitution payments. The letter included a note from Patricia herself, brief and to the point. "Mr. Xavier, I've completed an intensive program on ethical leadership and personal accountability. I'm working to become a better person and to make amends for the harm I caused. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so by insisting on what was right. I understand now that your refusal to back down saved me from myself. Patricia." I showed the letter to Melissa. "Think she means it? Does it matter? She's doing the work either way. Whether she's sincere or just going through the motions, the outcome is the same." "I suppose that's true." "Are you going to respond?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "No, there's nothing more to say. She apologized, she's making restitution, and she's serving her sentence. That closes the chapter." Melissa nodded approvingly. "Good. You've spent enough energy on Patricia Jenkins." She was right, as usual. I filed the letter away and moved on with my life. The HOA saga was over, resolved as fairly as could be expected. Patricia had been held accountable, I'd been made whole, and the community had learned valuable lessons about governance and oversight. Fall brought cooler weather and the beginning of a new HOA board term. Richard had chosen not to run for re-election, feeling he'd done his duty in restoring the association's integrity. A woman named Margaret Chen was elected president, running on a platform of continuing Richard's reforms while adding new homeowner services. Her first act was to create a neighborhood dispute resolution process, designed to address conflicts before they escalated to legal action. She invited me to serve on the committee. I accepted, figuring my experience gave me useful perspective. The committee met monthly and handled minor disputes between neighbors. Fence line disagreements, noise complaints, parking issues, all the petty conflicts that arise when people live close together. Most were resolved with simple mediation and common sense. It was satisfying work, helping neighbors find compromise rather than letting disputes fester into feuds. I thought about how different my situation might have been if such a process had existed when the shed was first proposed. Maybe the property line would have been properly surveyed from the start. Maybe Patricia would never have had the opportunity to dig in and defend a mistake. Or maybe not. Patricia's embezzlement had been going on long before the shed was built. The property line dispute had simply been the catalyst that exposed her corruption. If it hadn't been the shed, something else would have eventually revealed her crimes. By the time the one-year anniversary of the shed's relocation rolled around, life in Meadowbrook Springs felt completely normal. The drama had faded into neighborhood lore, the story of the HOA president who'd been brought down by 18 inches and her own pride. New residents moving into the community heard the tale during welcome meetings. It served as both warning and reassurance. The HOA would enforce its rules, but homeowners had rights that would be protected. Melissa and I celebrated our first anniversary with a trip to San Diego, getting away from Phoenix's heat for a long weekend by the ocean. On the beach, watching the sunset, she asked if I ever regretted buying in an HOA community. After everything that happened, no. I mean, it was hell going through it, but we came out okay. And honestly, the HOA provides value. The common areas are maintained, there are standards that protect property values, and under good leadership, it works. Under good leadership, she emphasized. That's the key, I agreed. Which is why I'm glad we have Margaret now, and why I'm serving on that committee. Good HOA governance requires involved homeowners who give a damn. When did you become so civic-minded? I laughed. When I realized that not being involved just leaves a vacuum for people like Patricia to fill. We returned home refreshed and ready for whatever came next. The house felt welcoming, the neighborhood peaceful. The shed sat where it belonged, a permanent reminder of the importance of doing things right the first time. In November, the HOA sent out a newsletter celebrating 2 years of improved governance. It included financial statements showing the association's healthy reserves, a calendar of upcoming community events, and a feature article about the new dispute resolution process. There was also a brief section titled Lessons Learned, which discussed the shed incident without naming names. It emphasized the importance of professional surveys for construction projects, the need for financial oversight, and the value of admitting mistakes rather than compounding them. The article ended with a quote from Margaret. Our community is stronger because we learned that homeowners and the HOA should work together, not against each other. When problems arise, we address them honestly and fairly. That's the foundation of a healthy neighborhood. I couldn't have said it better myself. December brought the holidays and another neighborhood party at our house. It had become an annual tradition, one I was happy to continue. The house filled with friends and neighbors, sharing food and stories and laughter. Mrs. Henderson, now 84, told anyone who would listen about that whole mess with Patricia and the shed, and how I'd stood up for what was right. She'd become one of my biggest supporters, which amused Melissa to no end. "You've got a fan club president," Melissa teased as Mrs. Henderson regaled the Patels with her version of events for probably the 10th time. She means well. She does. And she's right, you know. You did stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. I looked around the room at the gathered neighbors, all of whom were now friends to varying degrees. The community Patricia had nearly torn apart with her schemes and stubbornness. It was worth it. Even the fines and the spray paint and all the stress, even that, because it led to this. I gestured at the party, the people, the peaceful home we'd built together. All of this. Melissa kissed my cheek. Sentimental, maybe, but true. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, I stood on my front porch looking at the quiet street. Lights twinkled on houses up and down the block. The common areas were neatly maintained, the streets safe and clean. The HOA did its job, and homeowners like me made sure it did that job properly. The shed was invisible from the front of the house, tucked away in back where it served its utilitarian purpose. Those 18 inches of disputed property had been my hill to die on, and I'd been right to make that stand. It wasn't about the land itself. 18 inches represented something larger. The principle that rules and boundaries matter, that authority figures must be held accountable, and that standing up for yourself is sometimes the only option even when it's uncomfortable or difficult. I'd learned that I was capable of fighting when necessary, that I could withstand pressure and harassment without folding. Melissa had learned she could trust me to stand firm when it mattered. The community had learned that HOA boards answer to the homeowners, not the other way around. And Patricia had learned that shortcuts and corruption eventually catch up with you, though that lesson had come at a steep price. The full circle had been completed. The shed was properly located, my property line was clear and documented, and life had moved forward. The wounds had healed, replaced by stronger relationships and better systems. Inside, Melissa was cleaning up from the party. I joined her and we worked together in comfortable silence. This was home, fought for and defended. Every 18 inches of it.